Hello, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Alien Contact Organization on the Aquarian Radio Network. And I'm your host, Janet Lessin. And I don't have a co-host today, which is unusual, but I'm here with Dean Pratt-DeRosa. And Dean is the co-founder of the global meditation app MediChange, which is at www.medichange.me, and an experiencer of different dimensional beings. He is a researcher and is currently working on a book video series discussing the translation of the Hebrew and Greek passages surrounding extraterrestrial interaction in the Bible, who or what God is, and finally theorizes what messages God was encoding when forming the human body as well as other life forms. His passion is to help unite and heal the planet, starting by changing the ideology of separation. So, welcome to the show, Dean. Thank you for coming. Okay, hold on. Okay. Now you should be able to talk in just a second here. Sorry, when the show launched, it turned off your mic. It's still not on. Come on, Mike. Don't you love technology? Okay, Dean, can you hear me? Can you speak? Let me try hanging up the second one. We have two Deans in the back of the queue twice, so that might be holding us up. Okay, here we go. Let's try this. Sorry about that, listeners. There's always some techno glitches that keep us from doing our work. Okay, it's going in little circles. There we go. Dean, hi. Welcome to the show.
Hey, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. You're a little bit muted. Maybe you want to talk a little bit more directly into the mic.
Sure, yeah. Is that better?
That's better, yes. So I just want to listen to you for a while as you tell us, me and the listeners, about let's start with your different dimensional beings. Which beings did you meet? What were the circumstances? Have you always seen them? Do you still see them? So tell us a little bit about what you were experiencing.
Sure thing, yeah. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and really appreciate all the work you're doing as well.
Thank you.
Oh, for sure. This is awesome stuff. So as far as the other dimensional beings go, when I was 17, I grew up in a very Christian home. My dad's a pastor. I went to college to be a pastor. And, which is a great thing. I'm very happy and thankful for the experiences that I grew up with. Now, as an adult, my views have changed some. But when I had contact with, I guess you would call them negative entities or demons, for lack of a better word. That's a generalization, but who knows what it really was. But, it was interesting because I wasn't involved in anything. I was a good kid, to put it in other words. And well-behaved and living for Jesus. And at one point, I was about 17. I woke up, and I saw a skull with horns on my door, but about 2 feet tall, halfway in the door, halfway out, kind of this white, grayish, translucent thing. I don't know. It almost looked like a hologram a little bit, but it was the texture of it was more plasmic and moving. And I was like, what in the world? And it was pretty big. It was, the horns were a foot and a half about, and the face itself was about a foot and a half, or, right around. It was big. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So my door that it appeared on, my bedroom door, was right next to the light switch. So I finally worked up the courage to go up. And I got out of my bed and walked around my room. I'm like, there's no way this is me imagining this. And I walked around my room, and it would follow me. It turned on the door. It never left the door, but it would turn and look at me and follow me. So eventually I got the courage to turn on the lights, right? And I was like, oh, okay. So turned it back off. It went away. Felt really cold in my room. There's been a lot of different spiritual things that have happened with my family and relatives. So this is something where we're just like, okay. I told my parents. I woke them up and basically, read the Bible, went back to sleep, things were fine. That happened the next night. It happened for a couple weeks, every night consecutively. And it got to the point where I would just wake up and wasn't scared anymore, just walk up and turn on the light. And after I wasn't really scared anymore, it stopped happening.
Well, let me deconstruct that a little bit with you. Let's look at that. So, what part of the world were you living in? Where do you live when this is happening?
Great
what part
question.
Of the world are you?
In Tampa, Florida, in Tampa,
Uh-huh.
and there was a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of different paranormal, or just in that house especially. My sisters experienced things as well, but yeah, in Tampa, Florida, and that was about 20 years ago.
20 years ago. Now, were you near any military bases in Tampa?
In that area, there's definitely a couple. There's a Lockheed facility. There's an Air Force base. There's an Air Force base right next door where I went to college in Clearwater. But yeah, there's quite a few bases around there. And I honestly think from what happened, it might have something to do maybe with some older Indian wars, Native American wars, and especially since they've fought some of the giants according to some of their stories. But I don't know. Yeah, what are you thinking?
Oh, it does sound like a hologram, and I'm thinking of technology, but then again, I mean, since it's on your door, like if it's a ghost, let's just call it a ghost, they seem to be more free-flowing. They don't need to have a wall of that, it seems like something's being projected, but it's not coming through a window or anything, so, but they have whoever they are, they have technology to beam things. It just seemed like it never appeared anywhere but your door.
No, and
right?
It showed up, right, and where it would show up was on a laminated poster, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it. It was a laminated poster of Alonzo Mourning. It was a basketball player, or Shaquille O'Neal, I don't remember which one, but yeah.
Right.
So I don't know. I've never even, I know that's possible. I've never even thought about that.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, and I wasn't there, so I really can't, interpret things for you, but I analyze things. I had a spot on my door when I was a child, so I'm much older than you. I was born in 54, so this is somewhere before, 64, right? And it would appear on the door in this one bedroom, and I would switch out bedrooms because I was the youngest, and my older brother and sister had moved away. So this damn spot on the door, but it looked luminescent. And you would check it. After a while, you're not afraid, right? So you turn the light on. So I would put my hand in front of it. Is it beaming from somewhere? The scientist in us kicks in after we stop being fear-based.
Right.
What is causing it? Now, you were fear-based at first, and then you prayed about it, but then you said your emotions were you weren't afraid of it anymore, right?
It stopped happening once looking back now especially, once I stopped feeling the fear, was just used to it. And I think that might have had something to do with it. At the time, I didn't know. It happened for a couple of weeks and it stopped. And I was like, that was interesting. I didn't really have a reference to understand a lot of what was happening.
We still don't have a reference.
From a biblical.
It's like mystery.
Right.
What is
exactly.
that? So, anything else
yeah.
like that happened, or anything else? What else happened to you?
A little while after that, the skull thing, it was a couple months after, I remember falling asleep in my bed, and the lights were still on out in the living room. My parents were watching TV. My door was cracked open a little bit. I remember that. And I fell asleep and then woke up shortly after and sat right up, and there was two hands around my throat, but couldn't see anything.
Ooh.
And it didn't feel like physical hands, but they were definitely hands, and I couldn't breathe in or out. And I tried, and I was like, that little spot of, is this me just making this up? And I tried to breathe in or out, and I'm like, what is going on? And then my father had an experience with a demonic entity when he was about the same age, and it actually got on his back and said, "I've got you now." And he told this story to me, and he said, he saw a pastor one time say, "If Satan ever bothers you, just just say, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I command you to leave, Satan. And so my dad, when he was 17, and he didn't grow up in church or anything, he had just started going to church and getting involved in Christianity at that time. I remember the pastor saying that, so he screamed that, and this demonic entity left him alone. And so when it happened to me, that's what I thought of. And so I prayed in my head. I couldn't say anything because I couldn't breathe, but I just prayed in my head, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I command you to leave. And instantly I could breathe, which was interesting to me as well. And then I asked my dad what it felt like when the demon had gotten on his back, and it was the same kind of thing. Like, you can tell it's definitely a hand, but it's a different impression than the physical touch gives you, you know. But yeah,
and this
I don't
is
know.
very interesting, because my sister, she told me that she was lying across her bed, and she was stretching, so she had her head down, and her legs, and her back and her legs were still in the bed, so her head was leaning over. She was stretching. And all of a sudden, from under the bed, the hands came, and they were choking her. And she said, not the exact words, she said the Lord's Prayer, and when she said, deliver us from evil, but she couldn't speak it, same thing. And then so that was when she was not at home. She was living in an apartment. She was in her early 20s, right? And then my brother was living at our home, and I know the home I grew up in was haunted. There was just so many things. There were so many things going on, and he said that something came and started to choke him, but it was like coming. He was on his back, so coming on top of him. But he didn't do the Jesus Christ thing. He just took his feet and somehow he kicked it. And he said he felt the kicking. But I've never had that. But this is I've heard of people, and here you're having the same thing. Interesting phenomenon, the choking hands, and the other one, your dad got on his back and said, "I've got you." Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I've been recently researching astral projection and different guys that have programs and training, and it's interesting to hear them talk about how the astral body and its interaction with this third density physical plane, and you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for someone to actually feel an astral being's hands, that takes a lot of effort and intensity, and in a certain sense. So yeah, it's interesting to me, just trying to figure out the dynamics between the spiritual and the physical in that sense. But yeah.
Did you have any other sense of what that might be? Did you sense intelligence or sense evil? Did you have any other senses going? Any smells?
Don't remember smelling anything. The skull with horns.
Yeah.
I had a dream that witches were chasing me, and I hopped on a dirt bike and drove off a cliff right before I hit.
Oh my God!
It was freaking me out. I woke up right before I hit. It was the only place to go, and I saw the skull with horns in my door, and I woke up in a sweat. But as far as the hands, there weren't any other sensory things that I remember.
Wow. Okay, so what else happened?
I mean, as far as and I suppose something more recently, within the last year,
Okay.
I bought a house, and I live in Nashville, and I didn't I didn't know this till after I got in the house. Some things started. It's really interesting. Like, you could just, certain rooms had a negative energy. You could feel it. It was cold, and you could just feel like a negative sort of vibe. And stuff was moving in the house. Couple days after I just moved in, things slapping, like the blinds slapping and stuff like that. And you could feel a presence. And one night, the second or third night this was going on, I just had enough of it, and I decided to try to speak telepathically with the entity or whatever was doing it. And we had a convo. And when that's happening, it's interesting because it's not like you necessarily know if it's I don't know, at least for me, when I'm speaking with different entities or getting different downloads or transmissions, as you would call it, there's always a part of me second guessing it, right? Wondering if is this just me creatively making things up, But I do know that the key is just to remain open and sensitive in an open channel. And anyways, I had a convo with this being, asked me some questions, and we had a dialogue. And I basically just tried to help them. The one thing I did know is that ghosts and spirits, when people die in traumatic situations, they tend to get stuck in that point of space and time, and they don't want to leave that location, and they're kind of lost and wandering because of the emotional intensity that they experienced at the point of death. And so they might be ghosts, but they're just people that need help. And
they need help.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like we all do. Like even the most negative demon is someone that's still part of the Creator, I believe. So, anyways, we.
So what was your dialogue? What did you ask it questions, or it asked you questions, or both ways?
I kind of was like, the first thing I said was like, hey, look, I don't know who you are or what's going on, but I don't have time for this. This is a house of love. I'm trying to do things to make a difference in the world, and right now this is just, it's getting annoying, and I'm kind of over it. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on, but I don't, this is a house of love. There's no space for any animosity or negativity. And then I kind of stated who I thought I was in the beginning, I guess more in my soul or higher form, higher self form, and to which the entity decided to ask me some questions based on that, which was interesting. And I gave them, the entity was asking me why certain things happened in a certain way. And that's something that's like, that's part of everyone's own choosing and situations that we set up beforehand. But basically the conversation kind of went in a I'm sorry that bad things, some trauma happened to you. We allow these things to come into our life so that we can learn from it, grow from it, and just kind of went through the spiritual process of why catalyst is allowed. And even when it means loss of life, and that it's not over, you're an eternal being, there's still plenty more to do. And it was interesting because we had that conversation, and we just sometimes have to move on and let it go. And that was it. And then I felt the presence leave, thought it was interesting. It said something back. It was more or less like, okay, well, if that's right, then what about this? And I was just saying like how our soul's purpose is to be here, to experience, to live, and to learn more about who we are as energy, as part of the Creator. And told him there was a big universe out there, or the entity. So the next day or 2 days later, I'm talking to the neighbor, and they're like, hey, did you know someone was murdered in that house? And I was like, no. And they're like, yeah, it was in the news and in the papers and everything. And apparently Kim Kardashian, Rihanna, and LeBron James all tweeted about this case. It was with Centoya Brown, and a 16-year-old girl that was being trafficked out for sex with adults. The guy that owned this house, who unfortunately used to be in the ministry, and I guess he went through some tough times, went through a divorce, and just kind of, it sounds like he spiraled. I don't know. I don't know much details about it. I've only heard bits and pieces since finding out about this. But he was sleeping when the girl killed him, and nothing had happened. It's an interesting story. If you get the chance and you want to check it out, just look up Centoya Brown.
What's her first name? What are you saying?
Centoya?
It's Centoya? How do you spell that?
Cyntoya.
Centoya Brown. I'll look it up. Yeah, definitely. That's fascinating. So she got murdered, or she murdered someone? I got confused.
She was bought by this gentleman to, he wanted to have sex with her, so he brings her back to the house. And the first thing he does is, I guess he was in the military, and he showed her all of his guns, and that freaked her out. And coming to her story, she ended up, I don't know if she ran away from home or whatever, but it happened when she was 15 or 14. Ended up getting this boyfriend that kept her high all the time, kept her on drugs, and started pimping her out. And I'm sure as a younger girl, and especially in those circles of people, those girls disappear. Sometimes they get murdered, and she was probably fearful for her own life. And this guy, the first thing he does is show her all his guns. So, anyways, according to the story, they didn't do anything, but he kept laying down to take naps and kept getting up and going to the bathroom. And I guess she just, at some point, snapped, shot him, And it made
Oh.
more sense to me why he was so mad, but she she shot him in the back of the head, and that was it, while he was asleep. And so the entity, I think I know why he was holding the grudge. It was like, how come I was allowed to be murdered like that? And it was an interesting
Do you have
situation.
his name?
Johnny
Did you ever
Allen.
find out his? Johnny Allen.
And it's
Well,
ironic
that
because
was
there's a
good
bunch of
work
people.
with him. Go ahead.
What's
It
that?
was ironic. What? I said that's good
Oh, well, I
work
didn't
with
get.
him. I work with dead people too, but so your intuition just kicked in and you knew how to work with him. So go ahead. You're going to say some more about Johnny.
I didn't get the name when I was talking with the entity. I didn't ask.
Mm-hmm.
I unfortunately was just out of patience. But the Johnny, it's just weird. I saw that from the article, right, when I started to dig into the case some.
Right.
But John Allen was actually a good friend of mine growing up for a long, long time. It was just interesting. And he's a good dude. Would never do anything like this. But, yeah,
John,
the parallels
not the same
that we
John
see,
Allen. It was another John Allen that was your good
totally
friend growing
different
up.
John Allen. It's just spelled the same.
Right.
It's ironic. I keep seeing, I know multiple people with the same name. And there's something about names, and especially since we live in a resonant frequency universe, that ties us. Yeah, that's another topic. But the point is Centoya Brown was in jail, like sentenced for life, I think. And she had her chance for the retrial. I'd say 4 months ago. And I just so happened I don't know how I found out about it, but I saw that, and just so happened to see Tennessee State Governor had declared that she was going to serve her full term and spend, another, it was like 30 or 40 years in jail, which killed me because I watched a video that was made on, like, that she did for an interview, and she was like, I was a young girl, I was traumatized, what I did was completely wrong, I feel very bad about that, and I can't change the pain that I've caused, but she's been mentored by a good family and seemed to turn her life around, and especially coming from a traumatized child, just going through experiences like that as a younger person can really mess with you. And I think, that's why Jesus said, you better be nice to kids, otherwise tie a millstone around your neck, because the karma is super severe, because children, are shaping the future. So, anyways, her case came up for retrial. The Tennessee State Governor says, no, you get to serve the full term. When I checked the Twitter, this is the story. I'm not saying it's me.
Yeah, just say the
but
story.
I'm sure
yeah.
there were angelic forces out there. But I commented on that governor's Twitter page, and I said, look, I live in the house that this case happened in, and I had to speak with one of the entities involved. I said, in the instance of children, the karma is severe, and in the case, and I said, heeding the words of Jesus, I would err with mercy on the side of this one. And 2 days later, they overturned the decision. So I don't know.
I think you did it. I don't discount yourself, because I have responded on Twitters of famous people, and then I see it later in the news. So, it definitely, and I know people watch that, and somebody might have said, "Here, read this one."
Yeah.
Never doubt the power of your loving intention. That was amazing, awesome. I wanted to share something similar. I was stationed on. I'm not in the military. I was a civilian stationed on Johnson Atoll, and a young woman was driving a boat, and she hit a coral reef, and it went in a circle. It shot her out of the boat, and the sharks ate her. And so we lived in dorms, and I came to my room, and there was a police. I didn't know who lived next to me, and there was police tape, and it was that girl. It was her room. So I was right beside her room, and she was out of her body, dead, and they couldn't find her. They couldn't find her body. It was probably eaten, and everybody on the island was searching for her. We all, took off work and were trying to see if she washed up on shore and going out in the boat and anything. And so I see the police tape, and I open my door, and I hear a knocking on the wall, and I knew her name at the time, don't know it now, and I said, "Oh, is that you?" Let's call her, we'll call her Cynthia, because I said, please, let's develop a dialogue. Knock 1 for yes and 2 for no. So I did the same thing. I had this dialogue with her, and I said, your parents are on the way, because they had in the newspaper, the parents are flying in, and we're going to do a ceremony for you. It's been a week, and we've we're just calling it that you're dead, and of course you are dead. You're talking to me. So hang around till tomorrow and say goodbye to your parents, and then. But I said, please don't disturb me anymore, because I have to go to bed. Same thing. You're like out of patience. I have to go to sleep. I have to get up in 6 hours and go to work, so I need to sleep. So please stop making noise. Please don't, because there's a part of me that you can scare me. You can come up and stand at the foot of my bed, and I'm going to get scared, right? So just stay over there, and we'll be at peace. And she stopped, and it was. I know you're thinking this is my imagination, but I had knocks in response. 1 for yes and 2 for no. And I went, oh my God, I can speak to the dead.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt.
I believe it. I've heard all sorts of stuff.
Oh my God, that's wonderful. And then you knew what to do. So since that, I've helped the dead, because if you're open, if you're receptive, they'll come to you. So I'm not going to go into all my stories, but I've had a half dozen to a dozen episodes since then, and then I just help them, see their relatives coming for them, and all they need is a conversation. So anybody listening out there, if you have the dead coming to you, a lot of them are just confused. Like, where am I? They don't even know they're dead sometimes, or they don't know where to go. So you just help them, say, imagine that you see your relative, someone who loved you, and they're looking for you. And when you just say that, often they finally see the relatives who have been looking for them all along to help them cross over. So you can really help. So, wow.
That's amazing.
Okay, so that's amazing. Anything else you want to say about that case? And I will look that up, and I'm going to, if you have a link to the article, I'll put that on your show page since we're talking about it. And you still live in that house?
I do. I had to. It took a lot of, I'll say, there was a turning point in the energy. I felt the entity visit me a couple days after we had that first conversation, and this is interesting. I was watching, what was it, Cosmic Disclosure episode, or,
wow.
the David Wilcock show on Gaia, and I was sitting on my porch, and I felt that presence. I felt the same entity again. I was like, hey, it was a different vibe this time. It wasn't upset and angry. And I was like, hey, hope things have been good. I'm just watching this video on the universe and all the other life that exists outside in the universe, aliens and planets and extraterrestrial, things like that. And I could feel the guy go like, oh, wow, like that's awesome. He's like, it was interesting. I got the idea that the entity knew that the possibility was there to go explore, but it didn't want it. Just like you said, it's all thought-based in that dimension. So you have to be concentrated on loved ones or a loving frequency or to explore. It's totally up to your will. So if you don't believe it, you're not going to see it. So anyways, at least from what I've seen. So yeah, and so the entity was like, that's awesome. And I haven't felt the entity return since. So I'm hoping that maybe if, John Allen, if that's who it was, found his way and is out there maybe on some other planet incarnating or watching this, or who knows, or checking, coming back. If he's stuck in our cycle, who knows? But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say about the case. I'd be happy to send you a link.
Oh, I'd love to see it. Yeah, I'll read more about it. So this is what we mean. It's not all seeing ETs. There's all kinds of magical, mystical things that happen to average people. You're an average person. I'm an average person. And here we have these mystical things happening. So any other thing like that happen to you?
I do have one other anomalous. This is real weird. No explanation, although I'm trying to put some stuff together. But when I was 15, I was in a car with 3 other friends in the backseat. My dad was up front driving, and actually the father of my friend John Allen. All right, so this is going to be a little confusing. So there's a John Allen Sr. His son, John Allen Jr., was the one that I was friends with. John Allen Jr. was a couple years older than me, and he was playing basketball for college his first year, like his first game. So we were all on the way to go see it. He's 6 years older than me, but our families have been friends for a long time. And he had a younger sister, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, the point is, yeah, multiple John Allens. Wow. It's funny how that name keeps coming up in these events in my life. So this time we're on the way to go see him. And it's so weird. I have an indented rib cage, as in, like, if you go down midway in my rib cage, it kind of indents and pops out a little. If you've ever seen the pre-Adamite pictures where the real tall people with the pot bellies a little bit, or something, maybe, I don't know, that's what my rib cage looks like a little. It indents and comes out like that. And you see that's on the Italian side of my family. But both of my ribs, it was like that on both sides. It indents, and both ribs were squared off and pointed. They weren't rounded on the corner. And I had to keep a shirt on all the time. I got made fun of all the time growing up for my chest. They called me cereal bowl chest and all this other stuff. So it was a huge deal for me as a kid, very self-conscious about it.
Right.
In this car ride, we were squished in the back. And, it was pretty tight. It was pretty squished. And I was squished, and so the right side, I was sitting on the left side of the car behind the driver, so the right side of my body was very squished. We get out after an hour and a half drive, and I feel my ribs, and the right side of my rib cage had completely changed shape and was normal, like a normal, rounded, normal human rib cage. And I was like, huh? I ran to the bathroom, lifted my shirt up, and I was like, what in the world? Like, how did that happen? And I was 15 and was like, okay, maybe it was just because I was squished. I'll sit on the other side this time and try to squish the other side, and I'll have a fixed rib cage. Well, needless to say, I wasn't able to sit on the other side on the way back home. So I proceeded from then on to, tie belts around my ribs and stuff and sleep like that as a kid. I wanted a normal rib cage pretty bad. I kept getting made fun of. So anyways, it never worked. And I would fall asleep with a belt, constant pressure, never worked. And I did that for a long time, probably, here and there for a couple of years, just, if I got frustrated. Anyways, as an adult, I now know that your rib cage cannot change shape in an hour to an hour and a half. All of those ribs on that side of my body became rounded where they corner, and they straightened out where the indent was. It's like all sorts, just some crazy stuff, which makes me think that there had to be one of two things. Either I have the superpower to adjust my bone shape at will, right, or B, I got abducted and, taken out and put back in the same spot of time. And why would half my rib cage get replaced? Either half my body got blown apart in something and had to get put back together, or they wanted to sample, I don't know, or I'm just an experiment. But that's something I still want to do a past life, or I want to do a regression on to see what happened. I have no clue, but there's no explanation. And I even went and told my mom. She had me see the doctor and tell them. And the doctor's like, oh, you're young. Your bones can do that. And I'm like, no, not at 15. You'd have to break all of the ribs. They'd have to grow back together. You know what I mean? It'd be like a huge process over months to do that. So something definitely happened. Do I know what? No, no memory.
Happened.
But something happened. And I do have quite a few family in the military. Some of which are, they're way up in that world of top secret clearance stuff. So I have no idea if so who knows.
Well, see, there it goes to that first thing we talked about, the skull. So you have military, and they could be screwing with you, but we don't know. But that's what I call a screen memory. You have an incident, a memory, something happened, and there's more under that. And I married my hypnotherapist. So if I have something like that,
nice.
Okay, honey, let's do a regression on that. I want to see what's under it. And I'd say every time we did that, there was something more. There's always something more. So, we won't do it on air here, but maybe sometime I can offer you a session. It's too private to do that
that'd be fantastic.
live, but then we can deconstruct it later on a future episode. So that's amazing. That you have some evidence. That's not normal for your bones to shape.
No.
To change shape.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a lot of weird
Yeah.
stuff.
So that's the last real big paranormal anomalous thing that happened before we go to the
I would
next
say,
thing.
oh yeah, that and well, this ties in. Speaking of regressions, I did one past life regression one time, and to find out what happened with my ribs. However, the past life regressionist was much more spiritually in tune. It was like, we're going to see where your spirit guides want to take you first. And so I did a past life regression. Before that, I had suffered from a condition called chronic eosinophilic esophagitis. And essentially it's a condition where my esophagus would just shut on just about anything I would eat. And I was at Vanderbilt, and they did the allergy test on me, and I'm allergic to everything except like 6 things out of 100 or something, right? But when they came in, they're like, how are you not in a bubble? And it's like, I don't know, I'm not allergic to stuff. It's only when I eat it. My esophagus was the only part of my body that was freaking out for some reason. And I wasn't putting together throat chakra trauma. I wasn't putting together any of that. I was just like, yeah, like, wow, okay, cool. They're like, all you can eat is fish, rice, and some grains or whatever. And I was like, great. So I was really curious to find out what had happened with my ribs. And the regressionist, she asked me, do you have any allergies I need to know about? So I told her about that. Vanderbilt doesn't have a cure. They offered me a bunch of steroids. They don't know what causes the eosophytes to show up and interact with the lymphocytes and then cause these allergic reactions, as most autoimmune disorders play out, right?
Right.
So I said no, I don't need steroids. I've seen what that does to other family members. So did the past life regression. She asked me if I had any throat things, and then I told her about it just shutting on stuff. She's like, oh, I'm kind of curious to know. I wonder what's up with your thyroid. She dug into it just for a second, and then that was it. So we do the past life regression. I tell this story of me being like essentially a Roman general 2,000 years ago. It's one of the saddest stories. Super tragic. Like, all I did was cry on the table for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And then it was rough. And then at the end of the regression, I'm still in that state, in the trance state. She asked, will recalling this past life help with your throat condition? And I heard yes, so I said yes, and forgot about it, right? And she asked me to see my spirit guide. She's like, all right, let's take a look, ask if you can meet your spirit guides and see them. And I saw like 6 or 7 praying mantis beings with long antennae that were about 8 feet tall in white robes, like angelic praying mantis. And the long antenna is what was interesting to me. Everyone that sees those guys never sees antenna on them. So I don't know if that's interesting. But anyways, my nickname was Tristis. My full name was Tristissimus. Tristissimus in Latin means great sorrow. And this story was really tragic. Tristis in Latin, praying mantis, is Tristis mantae. So I was like, what?
Oh my
like
goodness.
all these weird, synchronicities. So I go home, and after the regression, take a drink of water, and I'm like, oh my goodness. My throat was just so much more open and it just wasn't, it was just like healed. And I was like, holy smokes.
Wow.
And ever since then, the condition's been healed, I'd say 95%. And if I'm ever super stressed out, I'll start to get a little bit of a flare-up. And that's when I started to see that these traumas we carry in certain chakra regions, and mine was in my throat. And the point was because when I was at the end of the past life, I was supposed to speak up and say what had happened and that I was betrayed and blah, 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 and I didn't. I just wanted to die. That's how bad everything was. And that's why it was stored in my throat chakra. And so there's been different lessons. And just recounting it, I didn't have to come to some conclusion. All I had to do was tell the story of what happened, and that's what brought the healing. So, yeah, that's
a lot
also
of times
super interesting.
A lot of times we just need to be witness, and then that allows healing to happen. The
That's
story needs to be told. And so, and then remember you were let's see, the being grabbed you around the throat. How old were you when that happened? You were
17.
A couple months later after the scalping?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then you had this throat problem, and then you did this regression. So, and then you saw your ETs, you saw the mantis beings, but they're part of your soul family.
I would assume.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, it really felt like that. Granted, Yeah, I'm still sorting that
I
out.
have a mantis guide.
But yes.
My mantis was very. I'm alive because of my mantis, because I felt like dying after this boy molested me, and I was 9 years old, and I said, and he was very mean. He came up to me in a crowd, and he was rubbing against me, and I was 9, and he said, "Now you're pregnant." And I was, because I didn't know how people got pregnant, right? And I'm 9, and I go home, and I think, I'm 9 years old, and I'm pregnant, and I don't know who this, I didn't look at the boy. I don't know who this boy is. And so that night I said, I don't want to be on this earth anymore. Just take me home, take me home. I want to go back home. And who came but a mantis being? And it was a female, and she held me in her arm, and she sent this loving energy through me all night. And when I woke up the next morning, I said, okay, I can do this. I'm going to stay on Earth. I can do this. So, yeah, that's great. We have the mantis connection.
Yeah, that, and there's a very strong reptilian connection with me and the avian. God, everyone I've been talking to, Ra's been visiting. Well, that was happening
Tell me
a couple
about
months
that.
ago
Yeah.
for the Chiefs. So I started I started this whole journey of going from conservative Christian, knowing my theology pretty darn well inside and out, because I had to study the Greek and Hebrew growing up, and my dad's super smart. My parents are very smart people when it comes to that, so I was very educated in conservative Christian theology. So that giving me a reference for how to interpret certain things about the world. I've always had questions about certain things, so I finally started to ask those, say about four years ago, something like that, and really dug in. And yeah, it's been definitely a journey and a change of frame of reference, just to understand that the galaxy and universe is so much bigger than what I had thought before, and about soul families. And so I got into I was trying to find people that I could. You see a lot of people in the UFO community talking about their experiences. It's hard to know and find validated or at least verified by multiple people, accounts. David Wilcock was one of the first people that I ended up finding on my own that had done a lot of scientific research, which is one of the subjects I love, physics and understanding. Because I started studying quantum physics because I had some questions about starlight taking millions of years to get here, but yet Hebrew, in the literal Hebrew and in conservative Christian theology, the earth is only 10,000 years old and blah, blah, blah. So digging into why would God do things and then immediately have to change it, that sounds like your theology is a confirmation bias as opposed to what's actually happened. David Wilcock had a lot of scientific studies on vibrational science and stuff that hasn't been allowed in America that much. And then he also talked about the law of one and got into the other ET disclosures. Pete Peterson is the phenomenal guy and Corey Good, when he started talking about Ra, I found it pretty interesting. And I went through the law of one. I've gone through it twice. I'm working on it a third time now, because if out of all the religions I studied, if I was given a choice, the law of one would be the thing that I would say is probably the closest to an existent truth of like what a purpose of a soul is. And they say it's not a religion by any means. They just say this is the creator and the universe, and you have a free will, do what you want, but here you go. Here's some ideas. And once I really got into the law of one, I was able to make a lot of Christian and spiritual connections and really started to relate what Jesus was saying to a lot of what was said in the law of one. And they discuss who Yahweh and Yeshua were from the soul history level. They discuss some of these Old Testament events that I've had questions about. So it's really interesting to hear that species perspective channeled through Carla Ruckert. And recently, I don't have any conscious memory. Well, I have one conscious memory of speaking with two hawk-headed, two people from the group of Ra. But that only happened once. And that was a weird, that was a multi-dimensional sort of conversation. But all these people started coming to me, and they have had, crowds of avian species, around them and their family and their soul family, and they're seeing this, and they have no idea about extraterrestrials. They're from other countries, some of these people. No idea about, it's not like they were looking for this. They're like, I don't know what's going on. And so this kept happening where I was meeting these people that I was having contact with Ra. in different ways. Not like the blue avian, not necessarily a physical blue avian manifestation, although for some of these people, they were getting caught up in in a vision or right there, or taken out of body. So it was really interesting. It's really cool to know, like what you were talking about, how much benevolent help we have just waiting, for our call. But yeah, so yeah, it was that's kind of died down some recent. I haven't had that happen, but it was real interesting there for about 6 months to a year.
Well, you know who Ra is according to the Anunnaki? He's Marduk.
No, I don't.
And Marduk is Enki's son, and Enki is the he and Nimma and his son Nigashita, who is known as Thoth or Thoth. They were the ones that genetically altered Homo erectus and made Homo sapiens sapiens. So we wouldn't be here. This species wouldn't be here.
That's what I'm trying to put together. Because from my translations of the Hebrew, the Elohim really sounds like a race, like the Anunnaki. I think it's the same beings. I mean, even Anunnaki or Anakim is mentioned in the Old Testament. I mean, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the Eman, all these different names for the same beings, or maybe different races or species of the same group. But the point is,
it's kind of like Italians and Americans, and it might be slightly different names because they came from a different part of the planet or a different part of the galaxy. But I think you're correct. They're the same beings, and based on different times, like sometimes Marduk is Zeus, right? So it just depends on what culture is viewing them, and they give them their local cultural names for some reason. The names change. I guess it's because they can't wrap their heads around that these are long-lived beings that are hundreds of thousands of years old. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, yeah. I was just going to ask, have you ever heard of Gerald C. Clark?
Yeah, Gerald Clark. He wrote a book. I worked with him a little bit for a while there. He's kind of disappeared. But he's written several books. Did you read his books?
I didn't read his books, but I watched a lot of interviews with him. I bought his table of his progression of the Anunnaki, and yeah, a lot of what you were saying as far as. So I'm familiar with some of like the history and origins there, and I did see him talk about one time how I think it was him that said that Marduk decided to rewrite most of history at one point and say that he did everything and had his name replaced with a lot of stuff. And from what I've seen, and these are the pieces I'm trying to put together. According to the Law of One, Ra says that they're a whole species, an avian species, and they built the Great Pyramid with their thoughts. This is in the Law of One, and that they helped establish civilization. And they were also working with another sixth density group in South America, which would explain the other pyramids being built down there. Those guys sound more reptilian-based. The flying serpent, the flying serpent kings and stuff like that, Quetzalcoatl. But that's the same sort of architecture that they're seeing in Antarctica is what's in South America for the step pyramids. But anyways, I'm trying to figure out the different interactions between the groups, because I do think that Ra was from what it looks like definitely an avian species. They decided to manifest into a form to communicate with us, and then in the Law of One they talk about how this never goes the way they plan. Like every time they show up, they end up getting worshipped as a god or something. And it'd be very easy for other beings to claim that they did X, Y, and Z. So I'm still trying to put those pieces together of who did what. But when you talk about the creation of this generation of the human body, yeah, that's where I'm, because I know exactly what you're talking about. And when we get into the translation of those older Sumerian tablets, and yeah, it really does look like Enki and Ningzerta, right? Or what's those names?
Enki and Nimma, his sister wife, and his son is Nigashita, also known as Thoth or Thoth. But he decided to come down into the human form, so there's a way for them to put their body in stasis, and they come down through the birth canal and experience and walk among us. So he's called the thrice-born Hermes, or Hermes, and like Trismegistus, I can't pronounce it.
Trismegistus.
Yeah, so Trismegistus, yeah, there we go. So that's that's Enki's son that worked with him in the lab, and he was born. Enki liked to have sex with love. Enki was not monogamous. Okay, so he was born through his copulation with Arishka gal, and you gotta love Enki. He was just very sexy. But his son Marduk was troubled because he was supposed to rule the earth. He was supposed to give rulership of both Nibiru and the earth because he was the firstborn son of Enki. But he kept getting overlooked because he was part, well, it's a long, complicated story, but his lineage wasn't as pure as Enki's father, Anu, wanted, his grandson to be, because he had to marry Enki off to his enemy's daughter, Damkina. So this Damkina had Alalu's blood, and Anu and Alalu were adversarial to one another. And then Alalu died, and he died on Mars, and the face on Mars that Hoagland identified was actually created by Nimma when she stopped by Mars on the way to Earth, and she built the memorial. So this was the first Nibiran to be killed in space, right? So, and he actually, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Alalu. It's a long, convoluted story, and we go over all.
I remember going through that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I've read a lot of the Sitchin stuff. I'm curious, do you know what time that happened in history, as far as the face on Mars being created?
Well, we're going back about 450,000 years ago. Now, my husband is a scholar. He's a genius, anthropologist, psychotherapist, and started college when he was like 16, but he could have gone when he was, much younger, but his parents didn't want him to go so young. So anyway, he's one of those nerdy guys, but he's very, very cute on top of it. And so he just turned 79. He studies this every day. Every day he's writing and doing more and more research, because we're tying in all the different researchers. So it sounds like we need to read the book, The Law of One. I kind of didn't go down that road, but you're saying that is a channeled piece of information, but it goes beyond to the cosmos, the origin of the cosmos. So we're going back and trying to get before the Anunnaki came here 450,000 years ago. And, of course, Cremo has identified these giant skeletons that are 30 feet or taller and under deeper layers. He went down the side of a mountain. He goes, here's what we found, a 30-foot giant. And then our government's always suppressing the information. So it's hard for us to get the truth, quote unquote. Yeah. Basically, the Anunnaki created the Bible because they started to tell these stories, and then of course we know the Bible got translated, and then there was the Fifth Ecumenical Council under Constantine. And the Bible was actually an encyclopedia of all these writings, and they decided what would fit into a story that they wanted to tell.
They canonized it.
And they canonized it. So, and we traveled with Sitchin. We missed the period where he was going around the earth. I probably couldn't have afforded to go with them anyway. I never was rich, but they were going to all the sites, and Sitchin had the largest private collection of all these cuneiforms and other artifacts. And then he died in 2010, and now we don't know what happened to all that stuff. His family did not like his research because they were very strict Jewish family, and they thought, there's always the UFO researcher, and the rest of the family's going, you're crazy.
Yeah, and what he was saying was that Yahweh was an alien for all intents and purposes. So
But that means we are too, because every single one of us has their blood. We're all part of them. So this planet was seeded
it's been interesting.
So
go ahead.
So you're studying the Hebrew. So you have. How did you learn how to do these translations, or are you teaching yourself, or how are you going about this?
Yeah. Well, when I was younger, I was taught Greek. That's the first thing we studied. And then I started to study the Hebrew some. In the 8th grade is when I first started studying it some. And I did it off and on throughout different parts of Bible college. And I'm by no means an expert, and the only reason, I'm not even, not even close. The only reason that I'm able to put together this information is because I know the Bible. I've been memorizing the Bible since I was 3, so I have a pretty good idea of how the story plays out. And then I know the parts that never made sense to me. And thanks to the internet, BibleHub.com, I can now cross-reference all the passages in the original Hebrew, and then go to the public library, which I did in Nashville.
What's that called?
And get
Bible
all the,
what?
BibleHub.
It's called Bible what? Bible Hub or Hub? Bible Hub. Okay,
Hub.
H-U-B.
Yes. .com.
H-U-B.
And it lets.
Okay, I'll have to look that up.
And it lets you. It lets you view the passages in Hebrew, and then you can click on the word and do all the cross-reference studies. So before you had to do this for Strong's Concordance in a book, and it would take forever. And there wasn't many resources for the Hebrew, because the Hebrew was left uncontested for so long. The more I dug in and saw that the word for God, Elohim, is plural. It literally means the mighty ones, and it gets translated as God, false gods, demons, even people, because they don't understand how to actually translate the word literally. If they just translated it literally, we'd have a much accurate representation of what was actually going on. But you get a singular God in place of sometimes what's being referenced as an entire race of species. So yeah, all you have to do is have a literal translation, and it sounds a lot more like the Sumerian account, right? And especially since that was written down, 1,500 to 2,000 years after those Sumerian tablets, around then. So of course Moses is coming out of Egypt and is well aware of the interaction of these Elohim and that they're ruling over different parts of the world at that point. So it's interesting. And that's why he had the audacity to ask Yahweh, let me see your glory, if you're so powerful. And what did glory mean? And there's a book, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called The Book That Will Change Our Ideas of our Ideas of the Bible Forever. It's written by Mauro Biglino. He's an Italian translator of the Vatican.
It's called what? It's called, slow down, I'll write it down. It's called what?
The Book That Will Change Our Ideas of the Bible Forever.
That will change your ideas or our ideas?
I think it's our.
Our ideas of the Bible forever. Okay. Good reference.
Yeah.
Yes.
You would love that book. He references Sitchin's work. He's a translator that has translated so many Hebrew texts. So the Vatican hires him to translate some of the oldest Hebrew texts they had. And he goes, okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do a literal translation. And he got what I'm talking about. Like, this is obviously an extraterrestrial species. So he wrote a book on it. That book that I told you is a PDF book that's free to download. He's got a bunch of other works, but it's hard to find them translated in English. So that's kind of tough. But he talks about how the word glory and where that word came from the Sumerian, and probably was referring to a spaceship. And he gets real into the pictographic. You got to understand the progression of the pictography and the language, and you got to understand what the bowl meant to Enlil and the Elohim, and why that the bowl was used. The actual head of the bowl was used in the language so much.
Right, because you had the horned. You had the horned beast on your wall.
Well, yeah, and I'm starting to think, from what I've seen, a lot of the Nephilim and those giants. So, best I can tell, you had your Elohim or Anunnaki, but then you also had hybridization going on between humans as well, but in a physical sense, not in some demons manifested into bodies. And I got to speak at UFON through web conference. Misha Johnson actually got me hooked up with that.
Oh.
And I did a presentation. I did a presentation on all of my Old Testament passages that show a physical lineage of the Nephilim. Like, here's their father. This is where they came from. And it says that they're part of the Elohim. And it gets back into these ancient, huge beings creating man. And people haven't, that's what I'm saying, people haven't even touched this stuff. It's there, and all they have to do is get on BibleHub.com and do their own research or whatever, but no one wants to dig into this side of their theology because they read the Old Testament, they go giants, oh, big deal, and that can only happen through genetic intervention. And then you have Yahweh reducing man's lifespan to 120 years when we were living to be 900. How do you do that?
Right.
Through frequency. And so yeah, and
what's
been really interesting.
DNA manipulation. They're geneticists.
Yep.
They can just through interviewing all the whistleblowers, there's people that are super soldiers, and our military, government, or whoever it is, aliens, they're taking fetuses that are already born, babies, and they can change it, before the mixture is put together, or in the womb, or after the birth.
Yep.
And that's how you have these super soldiers. So the biblical story from Sitchin, which is a Sumerian text that's been translated, they loved to experiment. So they made the minotaurs and the centaurs and the mermaids and all these beings. And the Cyclops. Cyclops was very, very tall. They had one eye. And these beings existed. And they have all these stories about them. But it's been so long that we had a flood. They're all buried under, tons of debris, mud and everything.
Yeah, for the most part, at least we'd like to believe. But it still sounds
There's
like
some that emerge,
these
though.
guys.
Yeah.
Yes, every now and then you still see that. Some Marines ran into a giant in Canada.
Say
Michael
that again?
Tellinger?
Yeah, have you seen the Tellinger beside the footprint? That he has this giant footprint, and he's standing beside it. It's as tall as he is. Who made that?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because Corey Good, when he's speaking, I don't know if you've followed much of what Corey Good has talked about, but he
a little bit.
He starts to say that, and what the law of one caught my attention because there's 200 points of scientific validity in the law of one, and a lot of which we didn't know about back when it was translated in the 80s. It was 79 through like 82, 83. But essentially, they go into like dating systems. They talk about how the war on Mars happened and how a lot of those people came to Earth and the karma that they've had to deal with. It's really interesting, the incarnations they've had to take to deal with the warring karma. And that ties directly into the Elohim. And another interesting point they make is Yahweh.
Story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And the other point they make is that Yahweh was actually two different groups, and at times when Moses and the people were really upset and pissed off and in a bad mood, if they would go to make contact, they would end up contacting the negative group posing as Yahweh, probably a Draco-based group, and they would get commands. And you see this genocide given by Yahweh, these orders to kill men, women, and children in a land that wasn't the Hebrews. And what it really sounds like is, the places he's telling them to wipe out are all these places that have other Elohim and giants and hybrids. And he hated, Yahweh was like, hey, I want you to wipe out. Like Gath was one of their main enemies. Well, Gath was apparently the city of Enki. And if Enlil was Yahweh at some point, was that character, which it really sounds like Enlil might be from all the parallels that I've seen. It gets really interesting. It's hard. It's still hard to put together the full story.
It's just a couple brothers that are always fighting, and they have two clans. They have their children and grandchildren, and of course Nimah is the Mary figure, Mary Magdalene, the divine feminine, and she gets written out of the Bible. But she was actually the one after the flood that said, "I promise never to destroy my people again with a flood." But she wasn't going to let it happen. The flood was a phenomenon of the incoming planets coming in, Nibiru and its moons and all that coming in and causing, which might be what's happening now. The heating up of the inner solar system seems to be some correlation with Nibiru coming and going. But I haven't followed that in a number of years. But what you're saying. Let's see, you said something and I wanted to say something about the two brothers that were fighting, they were fighting all along because Enki, as the firstborn, was supposed to be the inheritor of all this stuff. But actually, in Enki's personality, he liked to do science. So on some level, he didn't want to rule. He just wanted to do his scientific experiments. He's like Tesla, right? He just wanted to do all this fun stuff. And so Enlil had a huge ego, and he wanted to come in. But I think the battles that we're talking about in the Bible, and we've studied this extensively, I don't think the Dracos came in, although Thoth, Nikashina, does say that when he studied with the, what did he call them, the beings that were in the halls of Amenti. So he discovered this other species that was an Anunnaki, that when he went under Atlantis, he encountered the halls of Amenti, which became interdimensional. And these beings said that they, on every sphere, they have a portal to access, and these are like high-level, source-level beings, right? You have source, and then you have the sub-parsing from source. You know, the co-creators, first-level co-creators with source. Well, they're kind of like the Christed consciousness and the Buddhists, and they periodically come down and do some intervention, although they're not supposed to be intervening. But yeah, if you leave behind a story of Jesus, that's intervening, right? So they come in and they do their magic to try to pull us out of the dark into a higher level of consciousness. So he discovers these beings in the Hall of Amenti, and they teach him how to leave his body and travel through time and space, and be more than a 3D physical being, be who we are, which we are eternal beings, and we can go astral, we can do all kinds of things. And so he came up, and he was telling his dad about it, and then he at one point decided to come through as a thrice-born Hermes. So there's the spiritual thing. I forget why I went down this conversation. You got to forgive me, but there was a point.
You know what's interesting to me? No, it's okay. What's interesting to me in the Emerald Tablets is Thoth has a conversation with Poimanders, and the dragon, right? That's guarding wisdom, and it's interesting to see that dragon figure come up in different species. And what I study. I'm delving into the reasons for DNA architecture, as in, there's scientific evidence that shows that your DNA looks the reason you look the way you do is because of the biofield, or orgone energy, as some people have called it. But the field of electricity that's running your body, your soul, a little portion of your soul, makes up your biofield, and that is what's telling the cells to form, and the proteins to come together, and the algorithms that they do to make you look like you. This is why you look like you from body to body, because it's actually by the soul. And what's interesting to me is when you start to understand that the reason people look the way they look is due to their past life incarnations as different animal groups, and learning different lessons through those different animal bodies, eventually getting into higher forms of human and then beyond. And some have chosen to come back, as wanderers or helpers or whatever the case may be. It says a lot about the experience that the creator is having in that vehicle. And so it's really cool, to me at least, to see how the human body relates. And the reason I bring up dragons is because the dragon is in the shape of a vibration, like dogs, like snakes, like fish, like sharks, like horses, or the vibrations with legs. They're just vibrations with legs, right? And the muscle builds around it, and we see this pattern in life. The dragon is such a resilient, mystical kind of image because reptiles regenerate insanely fast, and they have a willingness to live like none other. And that's how come those Komodo dragons can have all that bacteria in their mouth, and they're uncanny for resilience. And so I started to see the reptile form as just the resilience of life. However, that can't be used in a negative way, which it does get used by a lot of species, that strength. But I also see species with wings, the whole idea of angels and wings giving you the 1,000-foot view as being just as important to understand the bigger picture. And there's reasons why every animal does what it does and why these bodies do what it do. It's do what it do, do what it does. It's like what you said.
They do what
the
they
law
do.
Of one, right. Let me use proper English. But in the law of one, they refer to the logos, just like the Book of John does in the New Testament. And the logos is basically infinite energy, the creator. And then sublogi are fractals of that. That's what you were kind of referring to. And that just keeps breaking up through, when you shine white light through a prism and you get all the colors of the rainbow, keep zooming in on those different colors and you'll see the different shades. And I see that's what we are, just different shades of the Creator. But yeah, it's been interesting. I studied a lot of what Tesla had to say and a lot about DNA. So it's just been trying to connect the spiritual with the science a lot lately.
Well, you're shedding a light on some of my mysteries. So I'm an extreme experiencer. I've had experiences since before birth. And one of my experiences, which was quite profound, was with a dragon. And I was, I'm trying to get my screen to come back on so I can see what our time is. I was on Johnston Atoll. And first of all, I think that the government or the powers that be, they know who the experiencers are. So people were paying attention to me far more than they should have been. And about a year into my contract, I was a civilian working for the military. I was taken in a kind of like an eyes wide shut ritual. The Greys were the delivery system. They came and took me, and I went to a little kind of shuttlecraft type of a small UFO with my boyfriend at the time, and then we were sent. We propelled out in this craft down into the ocean beyond the coral reef. So I have that. I'm going to put that in my book. I haven't quite finished it yet, showing where around Johnston Atoll is the deep waters, and that's where the underwater installation is. And once I was there, they took my boyfriend. They did all this stuff on that silver table they have. Where do they manufacture those, right? And and then I was directed, telepathically to put on this gown. And the gown was not only decorative, it was kind of like, a gown from the 1800s or 1700s or 1600s, a long gown, very beautiful, like going to a ball with shoes that I thought would hurt my feet. But it was almost like wearing the outfit I needed to protect my lungs, because there was the bodice of the gown was all these crystals and gems, and so that was protecting my heart and my lungs and my ribs. And then the shoes were full of gems and crystals, and so I was able to float. When I stepped forward, I actually went like 10 feet, but I had to do the motion of walking every time I moved. And then it became apparent why I had to do that. I'm only 5'2". As soon as I started walking in the direction that I was directed to telepathically, which by the way, that's not words, it's just concepts. But you understand it, you get it, okay. So I'm following these directions, and I'm heading down deeper into the facility, and it goes from this artificial man-made, whatever structure that was built to the caverns and everything. And so eventually I end up down in the center of this huge, giant cavern. But on the way, the Anunnaki kept coming in from the side, like a door would open, I'd see a shadow first, and then they'd step into the light. And they were gigantic, in their original form. I'd say the tallest ones were maybe 20, 30 feet. But I was somehow protected from fear. Like, we had that natural fight or flight reptilian instinct fear, but somehow I was not afraid. And I just was in this state of grace as I walked, and then they kept coming in behind me. And we went to this large cavern, and there was a beam of light on the floor, and it was in front of this huge black obsidian wall that went so high you couldn't even see where it ended. And while we were walking, everybody was saying telepathically, they were getting excited, like, is today the day? Is she the one? Is she the key? Is she the key? And I'm going, what are they talking about? But I got caught up in the moment. I just was getting more excited, and it was thrilling, And I wasn't afraid at all. I was like joyous. And then they grew silent and stopped talking, and I knew, okay, I'm supposed to step into the beam of light in front of this wall. And when I did, it frizzled, and on the other side was the most enormous. It's kind of like the dragon in Lord of the Rings, right? That's a size comparison. And we're all looking at this enormous dragon, And then she sees us looking at her or senses us or telepathically gets us, and she projects an avatar that's 5'2". So we're looking eye to eye. We're doing a puja, like a tantric puja,
That's
eye to
awesome.
eye, and we're going into each other's souls, and suddenly we're connected. We're one. We are each other, and we're connected all the way to source, and it turned into one moment. It'll all one, right? We all became one, and everybody was asking every question, and simultaneously all this exchange of information, and it was happening, and so everybody's questions were asked and answered. And I think when I finally returned to me, I swooned. Or I don't remember getting back. All I remember is the grays again, the small ones that are about 5 foot, 4 to 5 feet. They're plopping me down in my bed. Now my question is, why do they always plop you down? I mean, they could set me. No, they drop me from about 3 feet up, so you go, oh, and then they put it was like a puff of air or something, which I was paralyzed, couldn't move, and then they left, so I couldn't watch them leave or anything. But I felt them. You can feel when it's like the barometric change, or the whole frequency of the room changes, and they left.
Yeah.
And they let me sit there for maybe 10 seconds, and then my alarm went off. I had set the alarm before I went to bed, right? And I then I was able to move, and I was furious. I was furious. It's like, oh my God, I got to go to work and act normal, and I'm on a military base. I don't know who would be safe to say this stuff. Of course, they were in on it, but I didn't know all that stuff back then. That was 1990, 97, 90. No, it was December of '96. So I said I've got to leave. After that, I was kind of destabilized. And I left, and I came back to Honolulu. Johnson Atoll is 800 miles southwest. So, but you're talking about the dragon, and of course the dragon's everywhere, right? It's on the Royal Crest. It's in China. It's everywhere. And I'm saying, this isn't a mythical beast. Why is this being delegated to mythology? And so you're shedding some light on it. Of course, we have dragon genetics because we have the reptilian brain, and then probably the Dracos. They're all related. We're all related ultimately, but they're related in that they're in this reptilian form. I mean, I'm here in Maui, and we have little geckos all over our walls, right? And they're like little mini dragons. So.
Yeah. Yeah, reptilian genetics are amazing.
Yeah, go ahead. Say that again.
I just said reptilian genetics are amazing with adaptability and resiliency. They are by far one of the most resilient, higher density forms of life. Like, it's crazy, it really is. But yeah, that when you think about the creator and the creator going, okay, I want to create an articulated experience. If you're infinite energy and you're everything and you can do anything, and you want to create a holographic reality that you can experience things in and have an articulated experience to learn, just to create, to express yourself, to know. You would choose very carefully what bacteria, what bugs, what mammals, the whole nine, whatever creature would be allowed to possess electricity or possess the essence of life. Because as you move through space and time, that body that you're inhabiting is really going to determine a lot about your experience if you're an aquatic being as opposed to one that can fly or one stuck in the ground. And it's going to teach you a lot about pack mentality versus soul mentality. It's going to teach you a lot about, you look at animals and where their eyes are placed and which ones are predators, which ones are hunters, and you look at the architecture and the reasons for these beings allowing souls to recycle in these animal bodies over and over, and what lessons you could learn. When you get to a human, so this might just be me. I might be one of the only weirdos out here, but I see a lot of the animal resonance in people and leftover feline traits, leftover avian traits, reptilian, you name it. And so that, honestly, I see that playing into their personality a lot too. So it's pretty interesting. That's one of the things that in this book that I'm working on, the beginning's going through the idea of theology and the whole Garden of Eden account, and really just looking literally at the Hebrew. And I also have other Torah. I have Torah commentaries that are written by rabbis, and I also use the Hebrew from them and kind of go off. I mean, yeah, I really get into it. But at the end of the book, I discuss the reasons for human biology and architecture, aka how, like, certain things like the face, the head, is just a higher representation, a higher octave of the sexual reproduction organs. And they both create, they both manifest, and you'll see a lot of similarities in the architecture. And then you start to get into, this is one thing I found out recently, and it makes perfect sense. We have piezoelectric crystals in our pineal gland, and we operate very much like an antenna or an amplifier. We're like a walking radio. That's the best way I can put it, right? That you can tune up your station, you can receive stations, and you have these crystals in your brain processing all this electric information and basically propagating your reality. And we all do this together. And so, you know, what I saw was you have those piezoelectric crystals in your pineal, but we also know now that we have crystals in our ears, and they're called otoconia crystals. And what it does is it forms a triangle, kind of, right? Well, no, it does, in the face. And then if you look, your eyes, your nose, and your mouth, that is the manifestation of two perspectives, two energies, into the male nose and the female mouth. And the act of inhaling is the male's job, to inhale, to intake. The female is to express and create. And we have that manifested on everybody. Even though the human body is a male expression of energy, most bodies are a male expression. That's, anyways, yeah, this is another conversation. But the point is that, yeah, we have a perfect balance written on our faces. So this triangle that our face makes, the two eyes down to the mouth, the feminine triangle, is complemented by the crystal shape made by the male triangle. And it's just interesting, the Merkaba, the six-pointed star, the Star of David, how that is just a unification of male and female. And I studied vortex mathematics a lot because Nikola Tesla said, if you think about the universe and energy, frequency, and vibration, you'll start to understand it. And he also said 3, 6, and 9 are the keys to the universe. He got onto that by multiplication sets and different mathematical algorithms in that sense. I got turned on to it because I started studying vortex math, which was recently propagated again by Marco Rodin and Randy Powell.
I know Marco. I studied with Marco.
You do.
When I came to Oahu in 1993, I hung out with Marco, and he actually came to my house when I moved to Maui. So what you were talking about, you sounded like you were referencing Marco's information.
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating. Wow.
That's awesome that you.
So everything's a toroid. It's a toroid. Oh, yeah.
So you look at everything
He
spins.
conceived his twins in my bed with his girlfriend. That's how I know
Well, there's
Marco.
some sacred energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, really,
we were
that's a sacred
tantra
and beautiful
teachers.
thing.
When I met my husband in the 90s, and we still do teach tantra once in a while, but what you're talking about is very tantric. Yeah, the masculine, feminine, and you know, it's the yin yang, and it's how we, we fit into one another. But, and so when I was 18 months, I call it the time to go be human, because I was still connected with who I was as a multidimensional being, and aware that this is just an avatar. We're all the part of our souls that inhabit our forms, and of course, time is just an illusion of, this dimension here. But you can simultaneously exist in many planes, and planets, and forms, and we do. I at night I go to my other job. I have my other body, and I have this whole thing I do, and I come back and tell my husband about it. But they showed me when I was around 18 months, I'm trying to figure out what time it was, that I had to go be human. But they were showing me all the beings with the frontal eyes and the nose and a mouth of some form. And there was one after another. And I wondered, looking at it, like, why did they just show me those? They could have shown me blobs, right? But there were all these beings, and there were a lot of different animals and things that I couldn't, call like dog or cat. There's some other species that has another name, right? But they were all sentient and conscious, and one after another would come, and they were all like saying goodbye to me, and then I was just crying because I'm looking at them like the dragon. There's like a puja, and we're looking at each other's eyes, and then another one, and another one, and I'm just crying, and then finally they said, okay, it's time to go be human. And then there was this this loud crack, like they closed the dimension. And it's like, then I was talking way above my 18-month-year-old ability, right? And I was freaking out my mother. She thought she had given birth to the demon seed. So they dummied me down so I wouldn't get killed because she was going to take me out. Because she's very Christian. She thought, I gave birth to the demon seed. Yeah. So they knew what she was thinking, and so they protected me so I could be normal. And it's when I say that, it's like, oh my God, what are you, crazy, Jen? But this is a memory. All I have is a memory, like you have, and we can judge him and try to. But the more I talk about the memory and experiences, like with you and other people, the more we get this bigger picture. Now, I love your research, what you're doing about the human body and the encoding. And when you're going to get this book done, I gotta get a copy of it.
It's been taking me a second to work on it, but hopefully, I would say within a year. Yeah, the body stuff is still a journey for me, and I keep finding new parallels, and that's awesome because it's like, oh wow, it's just new territory for me, and I love giving my brain something, a new itch to scratch. But where I got to with all of this, the more I translated or looked at the translation of the older scriptures and the Bible and what we're told is scripture and God's word, the more I started to understand that the only true remnant of God's word we have is our biology, is the human body. It is nature. Nature is the untranslated word of the Logos. And so if you can read it, then you'll start to understand the spiritual messages given to and encoded in this body. Marco Rodin is so important. Well, not him per se, but the study of 3, 6, and 9 in vortex math and the 9-pointed star. I have that 9-pointed star tattooed on both of my forearms. And the reason is it's because DNA shapes that way, but more importantly, put the Vitruvian man on top of the 9-pointed star, and you start to see if energy gets to form, why would it ever pick 2 arms and 2 legs? What's the point? There's a necessary point for all of this. It's not just by randomness. And then we get to look at the spiritual lessons we get to learn by having to walk as opposed to floating. And just the manifestation of energy, it's pure scripture. And so the more we can read the body, I mean, that's just teaching me that what we are is so sacred. That's why your hands can hold so much in the fingerprints. They're nothing but pure information, and it's unfiltered, unadulterated. People have told you it's not worth much. You're not, what part of the creator. You're just a human. But there's so much more that. So yeah, we have the blueprint of the original Logos in all of us. So it's really interesting. It's kind of like those who remember first win. It's all about remembering. It's not about becoming the spiritual teacher. It's more about remembering you're connected to everything. And then once your brain gets there, then the body responds, right? So I don't know.
Right.
It's been interesting.
Well, I think if you're onto something, you're really onto something there. So, but what gets me is I've had times where I have total immersion and total remembrance that I'm there, and I've literally high-fived with Source, with oneness, and it's like, yeah, I'm home. And then I come back and I go, hey, I didn't have to die. I can do that. I can do it with my meditation, this is my tantric practice, right? And just to cut, I would get into a high orgastic state, and with my husband facilitating into a continuous state of orgasm. And then once you do that, you open the time travel, you open the portals, you're out of your body. You're like Thoth, who said
that's the creator state.
And so I'm traveling through. I get into that state, and I'm in the cosmos, and I'm out there, and I can do whatever. I can, co-creator, manifester, but I keep myself pure. And then before I do any kind of ritual, I protect myself from the dark side. The dark side, I don't know. It's something about I came in like this energy, so I don't have a lot of fear-based stuff, which is interesting. I talk to super soldiers and people, and I was raised Christian too. So, and my mother would symbol everything as demonic, right? And we'd have the same experience, and I go, "What? This is fun. This is interesting. Can't you see?" Can't you see love in there? Can't you see? I think we created this whole thing for experience. And that,
Yep.
we rotate. Sometimes we're light, sometimes we're dark, sometimes we're good, sometimes we're evil. That's why we're complex beings.
There you go. Yeah.
But it's a choice. Every moment, if you find yourself in dark thoughts, you can change the channel, like switch lanes. It just become aware of your thoughts, and that's what people do in meditation. They become aware of their thoughts and
100%.
witness the thought rather than immerse yourself and do the thought. It's not something you have to do. You can just watch it, and then you can select and make who you are out of all the thoughts that float by. So I've been doing that I'm 65 years old, and it's like, okay, but still being alive is a trip. It's very trippy, and this research that you're doing, I can tell you right now, is critical. And pulling in Marco Rodin, when I was in that group, and I would travel by law, I didn't have a car, buses all the way across the island late at night to go see his things because I was just so drawn to that information. And then he was living in a trailer, he was just living and struggling. And it's like, oh, Marco, when are you going to arrive? And it wasn't about money, but he was in a struggle where he barely had enough to eat. But he was so dedicated to his research. And then I haven't seen him in a long time. I tried to talk to him on Facebook, but he didn't answer. But that's okay.
Huh.
It's not critical.
I hope he's okay. I hope he's doing good. I mean, I really respect what he did. Even using the Baha'i religion to find this pattern was just, nothing short of miraculous, right? So, yeah, I really respect everything he did.
Yeah, that was one of the last things we did. He came over here and we went to his Baha'i, it was some kind of celebration or something. So we went out to the center with him. We got to witness his group there. But don't know where he's living right now. Interesting. Okay, let's see. We're running out of time here. I mean, we've got 28 minutes, but we can wrap it up. What else would you like us to know about your book, which is, you don't have a title of it yet. It's just,
well, the working title is You Are the Language of, You Are the Language of the Logos is what I was going to call it.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, the Law of One talks a lot about what you were talking about, energy taking different forms, dark or light or whatever that might be, as just a learning. The best way I can relate it is, what a Damascus blade is?
Tell us, what is a Damascus blade?
When samurais used to make swords or katanas, you would bang the metal and fold it in on itself over and over again, and you would get what looks like little ripples in the metal. But as you bang and fold the metal, the steel over and over again in on itself, it becomes stronger, and you're compacting the density of that metal, and so the sword literally becomes stronger the more folds you put into it. And I think that's the best way I can relate. The point of our experience is to add more vibrational thoughts, more density to the energy we are, because when the Creator, in the one Creator's form, anything that's antimatter, matter that's unformed, is just part of the Creator that hasn't been explored yet. And so the whole point is to add more vibrational density to the Creator, because the Creator is growing. The Creator isn't shrinking. The Creator is actually expanding and growing. Hence, we're here. And I think the ultimate truth that Jesus was talking about was a mustard seed, tiny little thing, can become this huge tree. And trees actually form in the shape of a torus. Look at the roots and the branches, and it's all Fibonacci.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, the whole point, I think, is God is we're little seeds from the one Creator, but our destiny isn't to be squashed in the ground. It's to grow into this magnificent thing like our source, like the Creator. And so that's, when Jesus was saying we're going to do greater miracles and how much control we have just by the amount of faith that we have. There's a lot of principles that I think Jesus was spot on, and just how we interpret it gets a little distorted based on what we understand. And really what we understand about the cosmos. The idea of how big space is has shifted theology throughout, ever since it started. So it's really been interesting. just to see how that all plays out. But yeah, all about the progression of that. And go ahead, sorry.
Well, if you think about that mustard seed, that's nanotechnology. And in a way we're all nanotechnology. So it starts with a seed, and within the seed is everything it takes to become that tree. And that little seed can become this gigantic. In Maui, you really appreciate trees because they're like 300 feet tall. You know, it's like Avatar, these giant trees. And you go walking through the jungle, and an arm of the tree is the size of a Volkswagen bus, and you think, oh, and they fall, they crash, and you go, wow, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're dead. There's no way you're going to get away from this giant tree that's like an Avatar crashing. Yeah, so, well, this is really fascinating information, and I like where you're going. Now, what's your life like? Do you do this professionally? Do you have a day job?
Yeah.
Do you have a wife? Do you have kids? Do you have a boyfriend or whatever?
No, yeah. Right now I am single. I've been obviously I've had relationships and I've gone through a marriage as well. I think right now at my spot in life, I'm really focusing on just being healthy emotionally, and very. I got to a point where I realized happiness is up to me, and I have to make that. I have to make that decision no matter what comes my way. Every wave of energy, I can get buried under it or learn how to surf it and use it to my advantage. And so for me right now, I'm in a state of just making sure that I'm emotionally balanced, because that's what really determines intelligence. And I want to focus more on clearing my chakras for astral work, stuff like that. I work for Dell, the computer company. I'm a data center solutions architect. So I help people build out their data centers. And my whole thing is I've just been on a path ever since I was born to make sure that if there's a way that I can help people, if there's a hell, I was telling people about Jesus ever since I was a kid. And now I'm under the impression that, we have everything we need, just you're perfect from the get-go. And helping people just understand that they're empowered, that they're free, and that they're free to live a happy, loving, and enjoyable, exciting, memorable life. And spreading that perspective is really like the best thing that I figured out that I can do to help the body unify. So, I mean, me personally, I've gone through some crazy stuff, some crazy tough times as well. But in the end, it's really just been a journey for me to, I think my spot, like what I need to focus on is just helping people that have come from a conservative Christian or monotheistic theology and build a bridge into an idea of the cosmos and other entities that are alive and intelligent, and how that fits into theology, and that the world won't fall apart if aliens are real, that Jesus was still a real person, and that salvation and sin and all that just looks a lot different, but the story's still beautiful, you know what I mean? And help people overcome that fear. I think there's a big need for that.
I love it. Oh, my God, I'm going to stand up and praise you. No, that's it. They say, oh, well, and I was on a panel in October this past year with, what was his name? Not Corey Good, the other one. The one guy, Randy Kramer, and we're talking about the false flag events. And I said, well, it's more than the false flag, is that the extraterrestrials coming. They're planning on the second coming of Jesus. And so he was saying, well, they've been examining. Will humanity, will society fall apart if their religions crash and burn? And studying the Anunnaki, and I kind of broke the God spell when I was 13, because I was, and you can do it by meditation and observation. So I'm looking at the Christians in the 60s and how they were just like Sunday Christians, and they were just hypocritic the rest of the week, And I just said to my mother when I was 13. I think it was somewhere after John Lennon was shamed for saying we're more popular for the Jesus, and I just said, I don't want to go anymore. I want to clear my head. I want to, and I thought my mother was going to, beat me, which she never did. I don't know why I thought that, but she said, no, if you just want to try to find your own path, I won't force you to go to church anymore. I thought it was big of her. But around that time, Von Daniken started coming out with his In Search of Ancient Astronauts. And then I, of course, had been experienced her the whole time, so I couldn't, rectify what was going on in terms of this, traditional Christian And my parents went from Presbyterian, which was kind of in the middle, to evangelical towards the end of their lives. So, of course, I rebelled, and I had to go the other direction. But my life has been very rich because I spent a lifetime researching while I'm looking at the rest of the world, and they're like in this programming, and they're spinning out of control. So if there is a way for us to address this issue and embrace them and bring them through, and I've always embraced the concept of Jesus. I actually went through a year of meditation where I went to a group once a week and I meditated every day at the same time. And when I went about a year into the practice, I had 5 or 6 past lives spontaneously download into me one night, and this was back in 1993, 2 or 3. And I remembered walking with Jesus. I had this Jesus lifetime, and I remembered like all these. It was so detailed. It was like conversations, sitting, swimming in a waterfall type thing, and very detailed memories and conversations. So, I think there's a spiritual Jesus, and I think there was a physical Jesus. My conclusion. Now, was Jesus Enki? Glenn Bogue thinks that Jesus was Enki and Enki was Jesus, and he kept changing his identity all through time. And Jesus and Mary, he believes that Jesus and Mary were the wedding at Canaan because they were forbidden to marry. Remember I told you earlier how Enki, if Enki was Jesus, Enki was forbidden to marry his beloved Nema because he had to do the political marriage to Damkina. And so their whole lives were screwed up. They were raised that they were going to be married, and they were in love with each other. They were the divine couple, the divine masculine and feminine. And they were balanced and equal and in partnership. And then all of a sudden he has to go and do this political marriage. And so she went off heartbroken, and she made love with Enlil, which is Yahweh, right? And this is the original separation, which got them, which is actually good. We have this romantic tragedy comedy, which has shaped all the story of humanity. So she had this child, Ninurta, out of wedlock and forbidden by her father, who was a king, and so she was the Black Madonna. She was shunned. She was blackened, and he was shunning Enlil as well. But then he realized, well, he's got to take, and Ani said, I've got to take Enlil and make him my heir, because I married my son off to my enemy, right, to their tribe. So this is a long, convoluted story of a very dysfunctional royal family that apparently Nibiru was part of the ongoing battle of the Lyrans and the Dracos, and this goes back trillions and trillions of years. And I think that humanity, by getting conscious, this is the great hope. All these different species have lent their DNA to make Homo sapiens sapiens, and we're the hope of the universe to end the endless wars. So, Dean, your research is so important because you were immersed in the program of Christianity, which is not the original intention. It's about consciousness and spirituality, and that got hijacked. And every time another religion was created, they even have hijacked the New Age religion. Everything gets hijacked for whoever is out the. Are they the reptilians? Are they the archons? There's another force that came in after the Anunnaki did all their dysfunctional stuff, and we're acting out this intergalactic passion play, which, if we follow through to the timelines of other societies, ends in the destruction of our beautiful planet. And I love Gaia. She's my friend. I know she's conscious. So I'm here like you are, Dean, as a champion. And somehow your piece is critical to help people who are in the program to wake up and realize that this is there's another way of being and another way of living life. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, I really appreciate that as well. That means a lot to me for sure. Sometimes you can feel a little bit alone when you're diving. I'm sure you know when you're diving into this stuff and no one's on the same path. And thank you,
Well, call
especially
me
for putting in all
anytime.
the work.
Call me anytime, because I do
Oh,
this
I'd love
too.
to.
I hit the brick wall, and I have my husband's almost finished with his part, and then I've got to take the book and bring it on home. So this is the part which is the tedious, and but you got to go into the language and you compare. There's so many translations, so I have to pull in the divine feminine. This is my job, because I'm a fractal of Nimma. I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to say I'm the only one. I don't want to say that she's reincarnated. Somehow I identify with Nimma.
You're related. Yeah.
We're related in a very deep soul level, related, because she speaks to me. And so my mission is to get this information out, to get us back on track, which is partnership, away from patriarchy and hierarchy, partnership, and the balance of the masculine and feminine.
Exactly.
I don't know how to do that. It's like a big job. Okay. I know I'm supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
it's tough.
We have just a few minutes left. What would you like to say more about? Yeah, go ahead. Your turn. I'll stop talking. I get carried away. I'm sorry. I'll shut up for a little while.
No. It's great. No, please don't. All I was going to say is I think the important thing to remember, and this was so L&L Research did a lot of channelings from different Confederation and ET groups. And there's a couple of different groups that are pretty popular. Hatan, Quo, and Ra, the Law of One, are some of the big major groups. And their message is very much synonymous. It's all the Law of One. We're all part of the same being. We're all from the same creator. Doesn't matter what body we're in. And what a statement from Quo that really struck home with me, they said that just you being here, alive, regardless if you get outside and make a huge difference, in the world or not, the thoughts you have are all that it takes, and to make a difference. And your act of service was just incarnating. That was the main part of the act, was I'm going to incarnate, and whatever karma I pick up along the way, so be it. This place needs help, and so we incarnate to help alleviate spiritual, roadblocks. But the whole idea is like it's a reminder for me to take faith, that we need to follow our hearts and our intrinsic desires and passions that are promoting unity and love and accelerating that spiritual progress. Because even if we feel alone, or even if we feel like it's not accepted, the work that we're doing, it might take hundreds of years for people to go, oh yeah, that makes sense now, But it's important to not stop, I think, is all I'm trying to say. It's really important to keep going. So for anyone listening, especially for you and all the work you're doing too, thank you so much, and please continue to do that. It's definitely encouraging for me to hear you say that, and to remember, not to get caught up in all the things that we deal with every day, but focus on the spiritual progression and why consciousness is really in a body, right? So that's great. It's been really good.
Okay, that was a wonderful series of thoughts. And the thoughts you have, wow. So just the process of being alive in a body, because we all affect the morphogenic field, and we're all connected
exactly.
through the singularities that go. It's like a giant grid that connects everywhere throughout the cosmos. So it is the butterfly effect. So whatever we do affects the whole, and the whole continually affects us. So we, just get conscious of that. And choose, be the chooser. See, when I was 4, they took me on the mothership and they showed me 24 realities of what was going to happen, like future histories.
Nice.
And the worst case was the planet blew up, and the best case was the utopia, and there were 24 varieties on the theme, and they asked me to choose. And I did. I chose a really nice woman, but then there's people who play with the timelines, and so we're not on that timeline anymore, but somehow I chose to go along with the game. We're always the chooser. We're never the victim, right? So if you don't like it, do something. Do something.
There you go.
Yeah, like you said, just being. Do something. So I was going through a lot of rough things, too, like you have. And I said, well, I'm going to do radio shows. And I set my attention, and my inbox is full of all these people, and I keep finding them. And they're like you. They're like magical, incredible people. And so I feel renewed and alive and vibrant. and hope renewed. I'm going to end with Jaiya Earthchild, and let's see. Okay, I came across Sanctuary. She's a lovely lady. She's my friend. She's now living in Australia. A lot of people left the United States when it got crazy, so hopefully she's enjoying her life down under with her beloved husband. But she wrote a song called Sanctuary. So final word to you, Dean, and then we're going to end with Sanctuary by Jaiya Earthchild. Okay, final word to you, Dean, to say your website or whatever you want to promote.
Sure thing, yeah. So I don't have a website up right now, but the app that we're working on developing, metachange.me, we're revamping the site. So once that's back up, I can let you know. But that app is designed to be a global synchronous meditation app to help people meditate around the world on the same things at the same time, to play off the Maharishi effect, the exponential effect of consciousness when people do the same thing at the same time. So I'll definitely let you know about that. But yeah, I think the only thing I'd like to say is it only takes one neuron to start a thought, like exactly what we were talking about. It only takes one person with that butterfly effect to change the world. So this is so great. Thank you so much for having me. And you're a huge encouragement to me, too. So, yeah, this has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And once again, Sanctuary by Jaiya Earthchild. Much love and blessings, and aloha.
Oh, the heroes and the heroines, the masters of time, have all come together to close the trail of crime. The sages and the holy ones, the masters of destiny, find themselves blessed to be united as one to raise the shield of love. We are here we are. Call to you who walk the halls of influence and power. Join with our ancestors on behalf of the ones not born, saying stop, do not sign that bill, giving corporate licenses to kill wilderness or animals. Mr. President, Mr. CEO, you're intelligent enough to know it's insane. Too little remains. We must declare that nature everywhere is a sanctuary. Creatures of the seas, give them fire.